Tonight, the Capitol riot 1 year later.
This was an armed insurrection.
President Biden marking the day and laying the blame on his predecessor.
A former president who had just rallied the mob to attack.
Plus, the Supreme Court takes up vaccine mandates. The two cases over the president's vaccine mandates affecting nearly 100 million workers. And the latest unemployment numbers, what that means for a recovering economy. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The 1 year anniversary of when the seat of American government came under attack. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup. A day of reflection, testimonials, tributes, and prayer memorializing the survival of the world's oldest democracy. The cradle of which became a crime scene after deadly clashes between police and protesters. The January 6 attack sent lawmakers scrambling to take cover as rioters stormed the Capitol. 1 year later, a semblance of calm over the U.S. Capitol serves as a reminder the republic still stands, although fractured, made even clearer today. CBN's Caitlin Burke joins us now. Caitlin, calls for unity seem even more elusive now.
John, after a year, the division in Washington alone is still striking. Democrats leading a charge to remember the events of January 6th, while Republicans largely shy away from the spotlight. President Biden started it all off today with a speech aimed directly at former President Donald Trump.
The former President of the United States of America has created and spread a web of lies about the 2020 election. He's done so because he values power over principle and because his bruised ego matters more to him than our democracy or our Constitution.
President Biden saying Americans should support the rule of law rather than the rule of a single man.
You can't love your country only when you win. You can't obey the law only when it's convenient. You can't be patriotic when you embrace and enable lies.
Former President Trump immediately fired back with his own statement, writing, quote, Biden, who is destroying our nation with insane policies of open borders, corrupt elections, disastrous energy policies, unconstitutional mandates, and devastating school closures, used my name today to try to further divide America. This political theater is all just a distraction for the fact Biden has completely and totally failed. Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell also releasing a statement. He called the January 6th attack disgraceful and antithetical to the rule of law. He then criticized some Democrats for trying to, quote, exploit this anniversary to advance partisan policy goals. At the Capitol, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi encouraged her colleagues to find common ground, reciting words spoken by President George Washington as he first delivered the Constitution to Congress.
This Constitution represents the creation of a government which would allow for the continuation of rigorous debate, but relies upon the common sense and good faith of the American people to find the better angels of our nature.
Investigations into what happened on January 6th are still ongoing. The Justice Department making more than 700 arrests. Attorney General Merrick Garland says his office remains committed to holding anyone involved in the attacks responsible. John?
National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke. Thank you so much, Caitlin. Republicans have a duty to condemn the riot and those who refuse to acknowledge it. That message from GOP consultant and former George W. Bush Deputy Chief of Staff Karl Rove. In commentary for the Wall Street Journal, Rove faults members of his own party who've excused the actions of those who stormed the Capitol in 2020, writing, quote, there can be no soft-pedaling what happened and no absolution for those who planned, encouraged, and aided the attempt to overthrow our democracy. Love of country demands nothing less That is true patriotism, end quote. Let's bring in Chief Political Analyst David Brody. David, we've seen everything from distancing to downplaying the events of January 6th among Republicans. One notable example is Congressman Andrew Clyde from Georgia, who compared the day to a normal tourist visit. David, Karl Rove, though, saying that in his journal piece, he raised the rhetorical question for Republicans, asking, what if it had been Democrats who stormed the Capitol? Would Republicans accept it as mere protest? He concluded and gave his own answer, they certainly would not. David, does he have a point?
Well, I mean, he has a point politically, but look, this idea that it was a normal tour visit or a mere protest, or come on, folks. I mean, it was disgusting. We know it was disgusting. Let's look. I don't even know where to begin. A year ago, I called them a bunch of knuckleheads. All right, the folks that busted into the Capitol, and a year later, guess what? They're a bunch of knuckleheads. And let's do the math real quick. Roughly 2,000 or so, maybe a little less, 700, 800, depends on how you kind of do the math. But let's just call it 2,000 people entered the Capitol. There's 70 million, 75 million or so Trump supporters out there. So if I do the math, that's 0.000, sorry, I don't have the time for all the zeros. You get the idea of Trump supporters that went into the Capitol. Very, very few. The problem is the media has made all Trump supporters. If you support Donald Trump right now, you enter the Capitol. Oh, no, you didn't, but yes, you did. You're guilty by association. You're either a white supremacist or you believe in white supremacy. That's the media dominant narrative out there. And that's also shameful. So we have to delineate between the two. The deplorable, well, that pun intended, I guess, disgusting act of a few, and what the media has done with this and what the January 6th committee has done with this, which is make it very political. I think you can be on two tracks on this and come to a same truthful conclusion.
David, we're tight here on time. Congresswoman Liz Cheney was the only Republican member of the House who was on the chamber floor during the moment of silence. Notably, she was standing there beside her father, the former Vice President, Dick Cheney. Does his appearance send a message to other Republicans?
No, Dick Cheney is 19, whatever it is, or 2000, 2004. No one cares about Dick Cheney. I don't mean that in a negative way. No one really cares about Dick Cheney. I mean, that's just the truth. So no, I don't think it has any significance whatsoever, other than the fact that we're in a Republican Party right now that's trying to find itself. Is it a populist party? Is it an establishment party? Is it a rhino party? What is it exactly? Well, Dick Cheney is part of the old guard, and that's part of the Republican discussion as we move forward.
As you've been talking about Trump republicanism versus establishment.
Right.
Thank you so much, David. We're out of time. We'll see you again next time.
You bet. Thanks, John.
Well, the Supreme Court weighs in on the Biden administration's vaccine mandates beginning tomorrow. Justices will hear arguments on sweeping federal rules that could affect employers nationwide and tens of millions of American workers. CBN's Brody Carter is tracking this story. Brody, a big day on the Supreme Court tomorrow.
Well, John, a deepening divide over vaccine mandates has worked its way through the legal system, reaching the high court. One attorney tells me what results from tomorrow's session will set a legal precedent regarding vaccine mandates, present and future.
What's at stake is whether or not our federal government can claim vast, expansive powers in times of emergency.
Justices will hear arguments on the constitutionality of President Biden's emergency executive order forcing private businesses with 100 or more employees to submit to mandatory vaccinations or face weekly testing.
And the answer to that surely has to be no. Otherwise, this concept of a limited federal government of enumerated powers has really been stretched to the breaking point.
Attorney Ryan Bangert with Alliance Defending Freedom says the vaccine mandate case is moving swiftly. OSHA first announced how it would enforce the mandate in November, which was immediately challenged in court. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals then froze the mandate and lifted the stay in December. Now the Supreme Court has agreed to step in.
If the court finds that the mandate should be stayed, then that would provide protection to our clients as well.
That decision would send the case back to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is overseeing all consolidated legal challenges to vaccine mandates.
There's also the possibility the court could simply decide the merits of the entire case tomorrow. We just don't know how the court's going to ultimately decide to handle this.
If the mandate is reinstated, businesses not following the rules could face fines of more than $13,000 per violation.
February 9th is the deadline for full compliance with the testing requirement.
John, this week, former Vice President Mike Pence's political organization weighed in on the issue. His group, Advocating American Freedom, filed an amicus brief against President Biden's vaccine mandate for businesses. John, back to you.
All right, Brody Carter, thank you so much, Brody. Doug Badger served as White House Deputy Assistant to President George W. Bush, helping craft policy on health care and employee benefits. He is now a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Doug, welcome to Faith Nation. Regarding tomorrow's oral arguments, what do you see and how can you describe the main constitutional issues at hand?
Well, the main issue is whether an executive branch agency can, in effect, make law. President Biden can tell the OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, to do things, but they can only do things that Congress has empowered them to do. Congress has not empowered OSHA to impose a vaccine mandate on businesses with 100 or more employees. If the court lets this go forward, we will see a big shift in power in the federal government from Congress to the federal bureaucracy.
Along those lines, Doug, the conservative-leaning court has so far declined to block state vaccine mandates in both New York and Maine. Should that signal anything here?
It may, but I don't think so. There's a very different set of powers, the so-called police powers, between the federal government and the states. The federal government is one of enumerated powers. The Constitution grants certain powers to the federal government, reserves the rest to the states and to the people. Congress has not granted OSHA the authority to issue these mandates.
It seems like the dilemma for the court is you have people who are skeptical of broad claims of federal power, but then there's also the concern of pulling back in the middle of a pandemic. So what are the possible outcomes that we potentially could see?
Well, there are several. Remember last summer, the court struck down on a 5-4 vote the CDC's eviction moratorium. The question before the court was very similar. Did Congress give CDC authority over landlord-tenant law? So one outcome is to follow what they did in that case and tell OSHA, no, you don't have this authority that Congress hasn't granted. The other possibility, of course, is for them to allow the mandate to take effect as the case is argued before the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeal on its merits. We're not sure which way the court will go, but I would expect the vote will be close one way or the other.
Maybe close, and all eyes will be watching what that decision might be. Doug Badger with the Heritage Foundation, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
From the job market to the stock market, the latest on the American economy, next on Faith Nation. Welcome back. To the pandemic's continuing impact on the economy, unemployment applications are up. Still, most economists say the job market is going strong. New data today from the Labor Department shows 207,000 new jobless claims last week. That's up 7,000 from the week prior. For more on the jobs picture, we're joined by Mark Hamrick, Senior Economic Analyst and Washington Bureau Chief at Bankrate. Mark, it feels like I haven't seen you since last year, so happy 2022. Mark, we keep hitting blips as the economy tries to fight back from the pandemic. What's the overall takeaway here?
Yes, John, good to see you. Happy New Year to you and everybody out there. And I do think that we're beginning the year on a relatively upbeat tone with respect to the economy, at least as we're looking at the job market. And so, as you note, we see a little rise in jobless claims here, but really below pre-pandemic levels. And remember, in recent weeks, we had seen these new claims at the lowest levels in about a half century. So that part is good news, not a lot of rush to get rid of workers. We're on the verge of getting a monthly employment report, and we'll hear about that. And of course, the number one issue on the economy that irritates consumers and really is causing tension for individuals and households out there, and that's inflation. And as of last check, that remains quite high and still persistent, unfortunately.
Well, Mark, you just mentioned that the monthly jobs report we're all expecting to come out tomorrow. Do you anticipate good news?
Economists believe that we will see stronger jobs creation, which would be welcomed after a disappointing showing in November. That showing had payroll growth of just over 200,000 jobs added, well below the pace of the past year, which had averaged 550,000. The good news here, John, is that the unemployment rate is expected to remain stable, if not move down from the 4.2% we saw in November. And remember, before the pandemic, the lowest point we achieved was 3.5%. I should mention that we just published a series of stories at Bankrate.com, which sums up an economist survey we do every quarter. And so the latest one is out, and they're finding that they do believe that the job market will continue to improve over the coming year. They look for that unemployment rate, if we put all the forecasts together, to go down to 3.8%, and some do believe we'll get down to 3.5% once again.
That is a hopeful picture, and I'll have to check out the website. Mark, finally, the Federal Reserve has signaled plans to raise interest rates to fight ongoing inflation. That could happen as soon as March. Do you see this as a necessary move? And then secondarily, what impact could rate hikes have on the markets in the near term?
Well, it's absolutely necessary because we've had interest rates at record low levels for the better part of the past decade. That's not normal, and it does have unintended consequences, perhaps adding to risk-taking in financial markets, and it penalizes savers. So even if we get, let's say, 2 or 3 rate hikes this year, we'll still be lower than usual. I think the financial markets can weather that because anything that's actually a return to normal is welcome. But if the Fed were to overdo it and perhaps raise rates too much, that would cause a problem for investors. But, you know, the expectation now is we have rate hikes. Markets are doing fine.
All right. Mark Hamrick with Bankrate. We always appreciate your insights. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you, John.
Healing divisions on Capitol Hill. How one group says God is moving among America's leading lawmakers. When we return. Welcome back. If any place needs hope these days, it's Capitol Hill, as we noted at the top of the show. And for one Christian ministry, the best way to bridge the divide is its singular mission to provide prayer and pastoral support to everyone holding office in the nation's capital. CBN's Abigail Robertson has the story.
People often come to Washington, D.C. wanting something from lawmakers or to criticize them. At Hope to the Hill, however, the goal is to encourage, support, and minister to these powerful and stressed politicians.
The whole idea is that we're focusing on their faith journey, how things are going for them in their lives. And they see that we're not asking questions about how they feel about this issue or that issue.
The only thing Nathan Kistler and George Roller want from members of Congress is to build relationships and pray with them.
And so many members, when you go into their office, like George just said, you walk in, they say, well, what can I do for you today? And we say, we don't want anything from you. We just want to know how we can pray for you. And it is amazing to see members. I've had anything from they kind of shrug a little bit to crying because they've never had anybody come into their office and ask them.
As a nonpartisan organization, Hope to the Hill steers clear of talking politics.
But it is a divided moment in American history. And so there's a few things to me that are transcending beyond party lines, politics, all those things. And one of the most important ones is prayer.
That approach has also helped them cross party lines to create prayer partners.
We can circle that House chamber together, Republican and Democrat, and seek God's face in the midst of everything else that's going on.
Representative Kathy McMorris Rogers tells CBN News she appreciates their ministry today more than ever before.
To be reminded of the spiritual battle and the importance of prayer, the importance of reading the Word of God and putting on the armor of God and being more aware of what God might be doing in the course of a day or a conversation and bringing it back to being his defender, his ambassador here on Capitol Hill day in and day out.
Congressman Barry Loudermilk agrees.
Even if it's just to come and pray for a few minutes, you know, and have someone there who is praying for you and about the issues that you're facing, because a lot of members of Congress, the primary issues they're facing isn't what's happening to our country, which is stressful enough, but it's issues that they're facing with their families from being separated.
During his time in Congress, Loudermilk survived the congressional baseball shooting, an assassination attempt, and a nearly fatal car wreck.
One thing that God has used in all of that is to teach me that we have to go through these times to become stronger warriors for Christ.
Loudermilk believes God will bring America through these troubling times of deep political divisions.
God isn't done with America yet. He has to take us to the edge of the abyss to see what will happen if we don't turn our eyes back on Him and get our eyes back on our cause, and that cause is the cross.
Hope to the Hill also trains lawmakers on how to share their faith with others.
One of the members in that group that day told me the next day that he used what he had learned. He shared faith with another member of Congress, and that person prayed to receive Christ.
George adds he once gave a Bible to a non-believer, and it sat unused on his desk for over a year.
One day, he had a brief moment, which is rare for members of Congress. He actually had a few moments. He opened it. He was fascinated. He'd never read the Bible before. He began to read, and then he began to read more and more. Through that process, he came to faith in Christ. He, since then, after that, he went to Bible college in his city, and now he preaches on Sundays when he's at home, and he's still a very beloved member of this Congress, and he loves Jesus.
George and Nathan also recommend believers call their representatives to offer encouragement.
And just say, hey, I'm praying for you. God loves you, I love you, and we appreciate the work that you do. And build a relationship.
It's likely to make their day, since most calls come from angry people.
People can call and encourage and build relationship with people here, because when the time comes when you have to have a difficult discussion about something that you may disagree with them on, they're going to want to hear what you have to say because you've actually showed that you care about them.
George and Nathan see Washington, D.C. as one of the most valuable and fertile mission fields on the planet. They want to share the hope that no matter how divided things appear, God is raising up a mighty remnant of people in America's capital. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Finally tonight, Christmas may be over, but the season is still alive. Christians the world over celebrating a special part of the Christmas story today called the Epiphany, marking the arrival of the three wise men in Bethlehem at the time of Jesus' birth. Pope Francis commemorated the Epiphany during Mass this morning, leading hundreds of worshipers at St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican. The pontiff reminded people to shake off consumerism in sync with this year's theme, using the words of Jesus to his disciples from the book of Acts, "You shall be my witnesses." A great word and reminder to end on. Thank you so much for watching this edition of Faith Nation. We hope to join you or see you right back here again tomorrow.